Welcome to One on One with the Grim One. I am your host, the Slayer of Posers, Master of Disaster, the Necrosexual. And joining me for this morbid talk this week, it's grind time, baby. Joel Grind from Toxic Holocaust. How the hell are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
It's time to die. I say that every time I see that. Also, I'm in the Sign of Evil vinyl in your background. It looks like one hell of a man cave to spend quarantine.
Yeah, man. I've been building it for years, man. It's a little bit of a small room, so it's kind of getting a little packed in here now. But it's got to expand, I guess.
The smaller, the better. It's got to be cold. You don't want a giant
That's right.
estate. It's got to be like, look like somebody's basement in there. So I'd say
You got to do like some bedroom black metal type shit,
Yes.
Got to make it very small and confined,
One on One with the Grim One, we focus on one album that holds a special place in your heart. And Joel Grind, you're very much a one-man army, so it's only appropriate that we're talking about the ultimate, original one-man army that is Bathory.
Yeah, first Bathory record, that's the one I picked, man. It's had a huge influence on me and just obviously a killer record, and it's just laid the blueprint for what I do personally. So it's had to pick that one.
The foundation for mental devastation was laid under the sign of the Yellow Goat. So Joel, take us back in time. Tell me about your first impression when you heard that album.
It's one of those things where there was nothing really to kind of lead up to that for me. I was listening to Venom and stuff at that point, but I never heard anything so like raw in that respect, where it checked all the marks for me. Like it was raw. It was kind of based in a rock and roll, like almost like a punky atmosphere to it also, and super evil, like dark lyrics, and kind of just everything that I kind of liked at the time and still do. That just checked it all for me. So when I heard that was it was kind of in certain respects kind of like a wow moment, where I was like, I didn't even know you could like really get away with stuff like that, on a record. It was like, it's so the playing is kind of sloppy, and it's like just the guitar tone is nasty, and it's stuff that, like, when you aren't expecting to hear something like that, it can be changing, and that was like, in my teenage years. So it was like just life-changing, really, in a lot of ways. Just it changed my direction for what I wanted to do with music and everything. So yeah, it was next level, basically, when I heard that.
It was like something you've never seen before, as King Diamond would say.
That's right.
And how old were you when you first heard Bathory?
I would say in between 15 and 17. I can't completely remember. I think it was like, let's go with 16. That's we'll meet in the middle there. So about that. I was listening to Venom and stuff at the time, but just Bathory was just taking that to the next level. It's just Venom and Bathory are so different. Like Venom is raw, obviously, and sloppy too. But Bathory just takes all of those things up like tenfold.
Sweet 16. In discovering the heavy metal mayhem of Bathory for the first time. Wow. And Joel, tell me, what was the first band that you lost your musical metal virginity to, so to speak?
I don't even know if you consider it metal, but I mean, like, stuff like Motley Crue and stuff like that, like when I was really younger, like, I'm talking like 7 or 8 or something like that. That was like actually like popular music at the time. So, I mean, seeing stuff like Looks That Kill and shit like that on TV was like, with the pentagrams and everything else too. It's just like, that was pretty, it was kind of scary at the time, because it's like, there's nothing I really saw that was like that. So it was like pretty wild. But but I mean, more for like the actual metal stuff. I mean, Metallica is definitely one of the first, nothing too crazy. I mean, at the time, like pre-internet and stuff, it's like pretty much whatever is like the more, I guess, quote unquote accessible stuff is the stuff that I heard first. But I mean, that doesn't change the fact that stuff's still really good.
Absolutely. Metallica, one of the ultimate gateway bands. My father actually bought the Black Album when I was just 12 years old, and it's definitely not a phase I'm going through, Dad. So in a way, you could say, he created some kind of monster.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's something that, I think people kind of look back on a lot of those bands now and go, this is like, you can say the Black Album, isn't like, people are like talking shit on it and stuff. But personally, I was like, I don't even know, 11, I think, when that record came out, 10 maybe. And, I liked that record when it came out, and I still like it. So fuck them.
Yes, it wasn't thrash metal by any means, but it was definitely a big arena rock noise that they really don't make bands like that anymore. You don't hear something on the radio or anything remotely mainstream on that calendar of rock. But going back to Bathory, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, Venom took the noise that bands like Motorhead had sort of perfected and took that to a new level with the satanic image and the satanic lyrics, and definitely a lot of speed and sloppiness. But there's something about that first, not just the first, but several of those Bathory albums that sounds like it was recorded in somebody's bedroom with an amplifier about the size of a small lunchbox, and recorded in less than 2 days, which I think was the case with the first Bathory album. And it certainly is still a very, very raw piece of material from that time.
Basically, like, it's funny, like, there's bands that it spawned a lot, the first Bathory record spawned a lot of bands that were definitely inspired by that, like, the Norwegian black metal, stuff like that obviously takes a lot of cues from that first Bathory record. But, it's funny because the first Bathory record was kind of, I think, came from the fact that not having a big budget, doing things where you're kind of like, you're young, you might not be able to play your instrument as well as you could, and things like that. So it's like, stuff like that is really hard to recreate. It's a certain, almost like being naive, and like a certain time period in your life where you can't really recreate that kind of stuff without you almost have to like really put effort into being like that. You know what I mean? As opposed to Bathory just doing it because that's the way it was. Like, people like trying to, I did that when I released the Yellow Goat record. I was like trying to capture that spirit, but it's funny when it's taken from like a kid doing it, with maybe not a lot of knowledge on how things are recorded and stuff. And then you get these like wild sounds that maybe aren't, the proper way to record stuff, but that's the beauty of it in a weird way. It's like you get stuff that you would never really come up with organically if you knew how to play all the stuff and record stuff properly. Because you'd be like, I can't record guitar that sounds like that. That sounds like too insane. But I think that's what makes it so cool. It's like, it's honest. It's like, it's really just a snapshot of young, kind of unbridled, like, don't give a fuck kind of thing. It's cool.
One of those lightning in a bottle black metal magic moments. And heavy metal is rife with those. If a lot of bands created sounds kind of by accident, happy or grim little accidents, as Bob Ross would say. For example, of course, you have Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi cutting off the tips of his fingers, which caused him to use different strings and downtune his guitars, and created that whole heavy metal kind of downtune sound by virtue of a freak accident, creating something that was the core of Black Sabbath's music that went to inspire countless bands. And then you also have Bathory. It is amusing, Mr. Grind, when you see bands who are grown adults going back to retrofit their gear, getting like Fisher-Price recording or phone answering machines or 4-tracks to get the most analog sound possible in the 2000s and 2010s, and now going into 2020 to kind of recapture that accidental Bathory noise.
I honestly, I kind of, like I said, I kind of did that myself with the Yellow Goat stuff. And the way I kind of look at it as like a thing like the first Bathory record, it happened by mistake, like something like that. All these things came together to make this like record that sounds like this, because it was all just different elements that kind of got thrown together, and it just ended up being really cool. So you can kind of look at it as like, if you want to achieve that sound, using like a little shitty amp and like stuff like that, you could look at it as like just using different tools. Like you use something like this if you want to get this sound, or you use this shitty, practice amp if you want to get this sound. All that stuff is like, different ways to achieve sounds. And that's what's cool about making a record as opposed to live, is you can basically create an atmosphere that you have total control over. Live, you're basically at the mercy of like, you know, the PA and like the sound of the room and stuff. But like on a record, you can like really fuck with all the different, you know, elements of sound, like more distortion than you think you should have, like to make that kind of sound, or like a little amp or stuff like that. And the way I kind of look at it is like that the first Bathory record and records like that in general, you can kind of look to those as like stuff that it's kind of groundbreaking in the fact that it's like so over the top, I guess. Like if there wasn't that record, there wouldn't be the wave of Norwegian black metal and all the bands like that. And if there was, it wouldn't sound the way it does, you know, because that's what was the blueprint for making shit that raw, you know? So it's kind of like, it is funny kind of to go make a record with the intent of making it sound kind of shitty, but it does capture a sound that if you, everything is pristine too, it doesn't really capture that vibe of like evilness kind of. It's weird how that somehow being more raw sounds more evil. I don't know why that is, but it kind of is like that.
You have the Yellow Goat Sessions, which was recorded under the Joel Grind banner.
Yeah, that was my tribute to basically the first Bathory record. I think we were talking about this before when we spoke last, but basically like I wanted to do something that wasn't Toxic Holocaust. Like I kind of have an issue when bands are completely ripping off something and passing it off as their own, whereas Yellow Goat is clearly trying to be Bathory clone. You know, I'm like, it's called Yellow Goat, you know, and it was the intent of being a tribute as more to the fact of passing off as something as like, I'm going to steal this riff and maybe change one note and then it's my riff, you know, that's a lot different than going in there with the fact of saying like, I really love this first record. It would be fun to do a project for all the other super nerdy Bathory fans to kind of, you know, they get it, you know, it's like kind of like, it's just like a continuation of that kind of sound. Whereas, you know, my gripe was always with the bands that were like ripping off other bands and passing it off and being like, this is the new Toxic record and it sounds exactly like Metallica or something like that. Like that would be a lot different, I think.
Yes, I appreciate and respect your transparency and paying homage to one of the great masters. And to the heathens and hoe racers at home who are watching, this is actually the second time that we've spoke about this classic landmark Bathory debut album, because we had our original session last week, and the Necrosexual had a little technical fuck up and had the ultimate mother of Spinal Tap moments and forgot to hit record in the Zoom call. So here we go again, and I once again appreciate your time and taking this time to discuss one of these classic albums. But I think that speaks volumes to it, that we can revisit it even a week later and still find some new knowledge that's to be gleaned from the classic self-titled Bathory album.
100%, man. Yeah, I appreciate you talking with me.
So as a musician, Joel, like what influences, if any, did you take from Bathory and impart on your own personal musical journey to raise hell? I
mean, I was always a fan of the vocals, especially. I think that the vocals were something that really, you know, I've always kind of like been influenced by things like, you know, Tom Angel Ripper and stuff like that from Sodom, and then also like Kronos and then Korthon. You know, those are like, that's where I draw influence, especially for the vocals and stuff. That I think that's something that I think I carried on with the stuff that I do that was influential to me. Of course, you know, the riffs are really cool on that, especially on the first Bathory record. It's very based in rock and roll, I think. Like it's more like Motorheady kind of stuff than, you know, the later day Bathory stuff, which I like all that stuff as well. But so a lot of the influence came from, you know, the riffing and the vocals, I think, for me. Yes, and the snare tone. You know, on that first album, the snare sounds like a bunch of twigs snapping over and over again. Yeah, it's a wild drum sound, man. It like everything just sounds wild, but even down to the reverb and stuff. Like, I would love to see a gear list of like what all the stuff that was used on that record, because it's just very. It captures a lot of really cool atmosphere to it. Why do you think the album holds up so well
so many years later?
I think the key to any record that holds up for a long time is the songwriting. I think the songs in general are just very catchy, memorable. Like when you have something like a great riff or, an awesome drummer or stuff like that, like that stuff is great, but it's not much if you don't arrange it into a good song, and the first record kind of proves that you don't necessarily need great musicians to make a record that holds up, for the fact that it's just really good songwriting and really memorable songwriting and stuff. And when you package it all in there with the sound and everything else, that just adds to it, But if there weren't good songs, it wouldn't hold up as well as, anything else. You could have that same recording and have shitty songs, and it just would probably be forgotten, or just a cult classic, like there's a ton of those where, like people find demos from like 84, 85 that really aren't that great, but people will tout how great they are because they're just rare.
What do you think your favorite riff off that first album is by Bathory?
I think my favorite riff and my favorite song on the first Bathory record is probably Sacrifice. I think that just has it all, for me, I think it's probably one of the most catchy ones on the record, and it's just that riff is fucking cool as hell.
And on the topic of the Bathory discography, like, is that the first album? Is that your favorite one, or what is your favorite Bathory album?
The first Bathory record is my favorite. Partially because it's the first one I heard, and I just like that kind of sound where it's more just based in like simplistic kind of rock and almost like punky kind of sound. I love The Return. There's pretty much all the Bathory records I like. It took me longer for other ones when I wasn't expecting like the Viking era stuff, all that kind of shit, but like it took me longer for those. But I mean, I pretty much like all of the stuff, but definitely the first two are the tops for me. And if I have to pick between the first two, it's going to be self-titled, I think.
You always remember your first, right?
That's right. for a few things.
Listening to Under the Sign of the Black Mark, that really kind of nails the black metal style that would come with like evil parts. Like it really has that sound down to it.
Like you can totally see where like early Immortal was coming from when you hear Under the Sign. It's like that. It sounds very reminiscent of that. It's just that was very like. You could tell that was very influential.
Yeah, I think my favorite one would have to be Blood, Fire, Death, just because I think it's like the perfect balance between that earlier like thrash metal speed, and then it has like the more mature songwriting. It has more epic songwriting, like A Fine Day to Die, and it has a glimpse of the Viking material that would come, but still with the intensity and speed and harshness that made the early album so great.
Totally, yeah. That one's really cool because it's almost like this. You could see where it was going, but I don't think anybody would have expected where it was going.
Right. No clean vocals. Nobody saw that coming.
No. Like I could only imagine, just hearing, Hammerheart or anything like that. You'd be like, wow, I was not expecting that, but or Twilight of the Gods. It's like it's so funny, but yeah, like. Definitely Blood, Fire, Death is cool, but it's like almost like a weird hybrid between like Slayer, Bathory, and like like more of the Viking stuff coming in there too. So,
and there are a lot of bands whose style changes drastically over the course of their careers, but it's a much smaller list of bands who can change their style so drastically and still stay consistently good.
Right? Yeah, that's a tough thing to do. A lot of people like. You see, like I remember in the 90s and shit like that, the one popular thing to do was like to change into start adding like basically be industrial, like Creator and stuff like that. They started doing like industrial shit, and it's like I don't have a problem with industrial. If some of those bands would have pulled it off, they might be killer records. But if you don't do it well, it's kind of like you kind of just have shitty records on your track record. It's like tough to change your sound drastically and then do it well. That's the tough part.
I once again revisited the new Toxic Holocaust album, Primal Future. Definitely ahead of its time, in predicting a dystopian future in 2019, because here we are in 2020.
Yeah, didn't want it to be predictive, but unfortunately it was.
So with that album, that too was kind of going back, kicking it to the old school. It's a departure from some of your other Toxic Holocaust albums. Very, very old school crossover punk sounding, a lot of D beats. Were there any bands who you wanted to channel with this record when you mixed it up?
You know, it's funny. I was kind of like thinking more of like definitely the punk element and stuff in there, but also like wanted to do more like almost like traditional, like, quote unquote, heavy metal kind of elements in there. Stuff like, you know, just like Judas Priest, kind of like, obviously it doesn't sound like Judas Priest, but like that's the mind frame I was trying to get into, but not necessarily the Judas Priest stuff that like people might think of when they think, like, not like Screaming for Vengeance. I was thinking more like Defenders of the Faith, because of that production of those records. Like, it just, that mid 80s like Priest stuff is like the 84, 85 stuff. It has like a really very 80s production, but I really like the way those records sound. And then I was thinking like stuff like, you know, like Running Wild and stuff like that too. Just more anthemic kind of stuff incorporated into the stuff that I normally am known for. And the reason for that is with the last record, I feel like I took the sound that I did on the last record is pretty much, speaking of Chemistry of Consciousness, about as far as I could take it, with like the 1.5-minute, 2-minute long, just punky, like Rain and Blood style, like just shit like that. Like I felt like I took that as far as I really could. So I kind of wanted to make this one not polar opposite of that, but just something much different, like longer songs and bigger arrangements and things like that. I felt like that was the way to go, really, because I was really happy with the previous record, and I feel like if I tried to recreate that again, I wouldn't be as happy with this one as I was with that one. It just wouldn't be as honest, I guess. So that's kind of the idea when I came up with the concept of working on this new one.
It definitely sounds, in some areas, like it was something like you said, 1984, 1985 production and sort of arrangements in all the right ways, without sounding like a ripoff of anything. So I'd say mission accomplished there.
Well, thank you.
What's your favorite song on the new album?
I think New World Beyond is probably my favorite one. That's the one we just did a video for. We started playing that one live too, and it seems to be going over pretty well live. But that one, and I really like the last song, Cybernetic War, because it's sort of it's so not like normally what Toxic would do. You know, what I would normally do in a song. It's like very like anthemic. It's something you would see almost like at a European festival kind of thing, and I always wanted to do a song kind of like that. So I really like that one. I don't know if that's a fan, like I don't know how the fans are reacting to that one, but I personally like that one a lot.
How's that sound for one hell of a niche European festival metal right there?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I think of stuff. Like, I'm like, this would probably go over well at a festival in Europe, because they just, when you have the song that hits right over there, I don't think there's anything like it, man. Everyone's singing along, and it's pretty awesome.
It's appropriate that we're talking about Bathory, because on your most recent album, you went back as a one-man army and did everything solo, mano a mano. So tell me about that creative process.
That was something that, ever since the Yellow Goat record, fans have been messaging me about that and like posting comments and stuff like, we'd love to see you do another Toxic record like that. And because I was in between labels, things like that, I didn't really have a budget. I couldn't really fly anybody out to like work on the record and things like that. So it's like, what better time than now than to start, basically trying to do something like that again. So it all started with the demo phase and me trying to learn drums again and things like that. And that ended up re-sparking a lot of my original excitement about the band. Like, I've always Toxic I've been doing it for so long. I've always had a good time doing it and stuff, obviously. But after 20 years of doing something, it's kind of hard to like feel exactly the same way as when you first started. But going back to the roots like that, recording everything in my bedroom, like stuff in a spare bedroom in my house, back to the roots like that, it kind of re-sparked all the stuff that I was like, this is why I do this. Like, I love doing this. I love the process. I love, basically like having an idea and then running down and then just being able to record it, like all the stuff that I used to be able to do that, that kind of, it wasn't that I wasn't able to do it, but it just didn't seem like the right time. And 20 years into the band, the 20th anniversary seemed like the right time to kind of revisit that. And, I think that a lot of the stuff in the future will probably be done like that because I just had a great time doing it. And I have a process now that I didn't have at the beginning. I was totally flying, much like the first Bathory record, flying by the seat of my pants, did not know what I was doing. And now I can work a lot faster and just, I know what I want the end result to be before I start, which doing the first record, I had no idea what I wanted it to sound like or what it would turn out to be, and just kind of took it a step at a time. But now I can see the bigger picture. So, yeah, I want to continue doing stuff like that.
Was it challenging to write music without anybody else to like bounce ideas off of, where, you kind of, like myself, for example, with the Necrosexual, I very much have a one-man army approach, and a lot of it is, but I'm also a one-man army that also collaborates with musicians from time to time. So to go from that to just being, when you're the only one, obviously you delivered a great album, so I guess not. What was that creative process like when it was just you going solo?
Well, there's a classic, I think it was like Greg Ginn from Black Flag or somebody said something like, if you do everything yourself, you also make all the mistakes, so it's like you don't have anybody to blame or like be, basically like if you fuck something up, it's on you. You're the reason why that happened. So that was to kind of avoid that as much as possible. The way I did that was I wrote a lot of things and I let a lot of time go on in between recording something to when I actually released it. So it gave me a buffer zone to listen with fresh ears and kind of take it from a writing phase to like an editing phase, to where I would be like, okay, this isn't working. I don't like this song, or I don't like this riff, and then it gave me time to change it, as opposed to just basically going into the studio, writing a bunch of stuff and then releasing it. That gave me the perspective of almost like bouncing it off someone else. Because when you hear something with fresh ears, it's totally different than when you hear it when you're used to hearing it over and over. You get almost used to hearing things. If you hear it enough, you get used to it, but if you hear it and it's something and you haven't heard it in a week or, a month or whatever, the stuff that maybe isn't as good sticks out like a sore thumb right away, as opposed to hearing it all the time and you get accustomed to hearing it. So that helped out a lot. I recommend that for pretty much anybody, to give it a little bit of buffer time before you release something, just to like catch any last things that stick out to you. Because after it gets released, you're stuck with it.
Go for a little walk, give your mind a break. Or of course, I'm definitely guilty of this, thinking, a lot of the times, write lyrics before a show, write lyrics right before you head into the studio, write guitar solos before you record, and then you go and you play those songs and you listen to them and you play them live and you get your repetition, and then you realize, oh shit, like I could have done it this way, or I could have said it this way, or you figure out a better way to play the solo or to deliver the lyrics, but it's already recorded. So that's definitely some very great advice that all the heavy metal hellraisers can learn from at home.
It's funny because great things can happen when you're under pressure too, when you have to write those last minute lyrics or that last minute song. A lot of the times the last song on a record that I write is usually my favorite one, like New World Beyond. It's weird how that can be too. But even then, I still waited. There was a time period between me writing the record, between me mixing the record, and then me, mastering the record. So there was times in between those periods where if there was something that really was bugging me, I could go back. And
it also helps. You're one hell of a producer, so you're also able to get those tones nice and sweet and grim on this new album. Yeah, and I think based on our last conversation, we also realized a correlation. Basically, any band whose name ends with ER, you're the guy for, because you've had Ranger, Expander, Hellripper, Slashers. Those are just off the top of my head. But whether your band name ends in ER or you're just a hellacious metal band, definitely hit up Joel Grind for Grime Time to put that extra layer of coating that makes it especially grim on your album.
That's right. Yeah, make it extra grim.
Where can people reach out to you if they want to get their albums mixed or mastered?
I always send people just to joelgrind.com. There's a contact form on there, and that's usually easier for me to keep track of stuff than just emailing me directly, because sometimes shit ends up in spam, or like I don't know what people are referencing. You know, this keeps everything organized. So if you want mastering or mixing stuff, just hit me on joelgrind.com, and there's a contact form on there, and that's usually the best way.
So hit up this man when it's grind time. And Joel Grind, I want to thank you for your time once again to go one-on-one with the Grim One, and we definitely recorded it. So mission accomplished. What would you like to say to your fans that are watching at home?
Thanks for 20 years of support. I couldn't have done any of this without you guys, so it really means a lot.
Yes, and Joel Grind, to you and to Toxic Holocaust, bon anniversaire, as they say. Happy 20th anniversary, and wishing you another 20 years of heavy metal hell raising. So this has been the Necrosexual, and I will see you in hell. Thanks a lot, Joel Grind.